Good evening. Welcome to this meeting of the Shareholder Committee. I'm going to start with a couple of bits of arrangements. We've got a few people joining us online this evening. We've got Andy Laslett, and now I've forgotten Sandy Boyle from Yorwaste, and Helen Whitehead joining us online this evening. We do have 3 items on the agenda that have confidential papers, and I can find no sensible way to group those together. So I'm afraid it might mean a little bit of coming and going for people, and I apologise for that. But it genuinely doesn't make sense to do half an item and then suspend the confidential items till later. So we'll work with that as we go. And in line with the council's policy, we are trying to run our meetings as paper-free as possible. So while you might see councillors and officers on their laptops, that is because that is where we have our papers and where we make notes through meetings. So don't think that we're being distracted playing solitaire. I can assure you we're all paying attention to the meeting. So we'll move to the agenda. Yes, and we have apologies from Councillor Douglas, who can't be here this evening. She's got another meeting, so Councillor Kent is substituting for her. So first item on our agenda is declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest anyone needs to make at this point? No, okay. So move on and look at the minutes of the last meeting held on the 19th of June. Is everybody content for me to sign those minutes? Yep, great. Okay, and item 3 on our agenda, we need to make a decision on excluding the public and press from the meeting during consideration of appendices 2, 3, 4 and 5 of agenda item 6. Annex A of agenda item 7 and appendix 1 of agenda item 8 for the reasons listed in the agenda. Do I have any objection to that? No, okay. Then we shall, at those points in the meeting, ask everyone who isn't a committee member or officer to leave. We don't have anyone registered to speak in public participation, so we'll move swiftly into item number 5, the Yorwaste update. And I do believe that we do have Sandy online.
Thank you, Chair. Can you all hear me?
We can hear you, yeah, thank you.
Jolly good. So I guess we'll dive straight into the report. I mean, we've got the boilerplate, which we've sort of talked through. I do like to continue to reiterate that at the start of every meeting, primarily to sort of show that because we're a technical company, it's not all about bottom line, it's about what we cost, and it's also about the additional benefits that we bring intangibly. So I don't think that's particularly contentious, unless there's any further questions on that.
No, can't see any.
In terms of the reports to the accounts, our last session, we did talk about the full year outturn. And we talked about most of the reasons that were sitting behind our sort of performance for the last full fiscal year ending March 23. We did sort of point out that we still had the technical review of the aftercare, which is a fairly sort of detailed accountancy type thing, which needs to be done every so often. We had that review with the auditors. They put it through to their specialist team for an extra technical review, which they haven't done before. They were happy with that by the time we got to the end of it, and we're comfortable to report a profit of 1.3 million for profit before tax for that year ended. That's about 300,000 up on the prior year. Is there any questions on either that or on the actual published annual report and accounts, which we also included in the report?
Any questions? No, no.
We're now just past the half year and the year, and we're actually sort of trending slightly ahead of where we were last year in terms of profit. This is primarily due to continued strength in landfill gas. The rates are actually slightly ahead of where they were last year. And we've got those pretty much locked in for the remainder of the full fiscal year. So we've got an annualized impact of that, because last year we didn't get the full fiscal year. This year we are getting the full fiscal year of those higher rates, even although the volumes are starting to drop off again as we return to the trend decline in landfill gas volumes. We've also managed to hold on to some specific third-party processing contracts, which are also bringing us some additional profit. Absent any significant external shocks, which may or may not come in the next 6 months, I think we're cautiously optimistic that we'll be at least in line, if not ahead of where we were last year for the full year outturn. Any questions on current performance?
No, don't see any.
Government waste strategy. I think it's been an interesting time over the past year. It would appear that every time the authority, DEFRA or EA make a move, it involves some additional costs for the local authorities. Things like persistent organic pollutants, things like the abolition of DIY charges at HWRCs. All of these can be managed. They provide an additional, or they create an additional challenge in the collection and segregation and processing of the waste, but also specifically they create additional costs for the authorities. I have probably slightly preempted by rather optimistically hoping we wouldn't see any significant waste strategy announcements between now and the end of the current government's sitting. But actually today and in the afternoon, they've released some guidance on how they want the simplified waste strategy to proceed. So I just need to digest that. It is literally hot off the press. And I don't think anything in the initial reading of it gives us significant cause for concern. But as is often the case in government policy, the devil will be in the additional detail. So that will be something we will digest. And if there's any immediate actions that we need to start working with the waste teams with, we will do that. Any questions on those?
No.
Okay. In terms of environment and the climate change, the application's gone in for the large-scale solar array at Harewood. So that's going through its process. If and when that's granted, we've still got the challenge of connection to the grid. There is apparently some moves in government policy to try and accelerate that. And ultimately, it will depend on which projects are available to go live at which date that will actually determine the final date, and that will be determined by the national grid, not by the local Northern Power Grid. We're also looking on a slightly more modest scale and slightly less problematic for connections, small-scale solar for Yorwaste to try and offset its emissions in the years to come. Those will be done on phased investment basis as the company can afford it and as the business cases support over the next coming years. And they will be relatively modest in their scale, but ultimately to try and get to a point where we, at a minimum, can offset our electricity on an annual basis with solar generation. I've included a bit in here about mobile plant fleet because we do tend to focus quite often on our road-based fleet and the carbon emissions from that. All our road fleet is Eurocat 6. Every single vehicle is Eurocat 6 and therefore would comply with various low emission zones and also gives us better fuel efficiency than the predecessors. On the mobile plant, there's no direct like-for-like comparison, but in terms of technological stages of development, stage 4B/stage 5 is broadly aligned to Eurocat 6, and over 50% of our fleet are at that. A further 28% at 4A, which is not as good, but certainly not disastrous. And then we've got about a fifth of our fleet is at stage 3, which is probably what you would probably not be allowed under ULEZ reasons. However, this tends to be very, very low volume on very, very low use on very, very low volume sites. So ultimately, in the big scheme of things, they will be phased out as and when the put out to pasture policy puts better, newer vehicles in to replace them. Ultimately, we want the best bits of kit for the highest volume sites. And that always tends to favour Harewood, which will always have the newest bits of kit. But then as they sort of get a bit older, they get moved out into lower volume sites. By 2030, 90% of our flight will be stage 5 or above, and the remainder will be stage 4B. And once again, those are likely to be very low volume sites with very low sort of usage. That will see a reduction in our carbon emissions over this period as these more fuel efficient vehicles get rolled out. And I think sort of as it goes without saying that as and when technology presents it, we will look to implement it in the fleet if it is both commercially and economically viable, so and operationally viable. Any questions on that?
Yeah, I think Councillor Kent has a question.
Thank you. Can I just ask if Yorwaste has its own climate action plan or does its own carbon auditing? Because those are great figures in terms of ambition to reduce, but are you actually measuring it with an aim to reduce? And you'll be aware that your City Council has announced net zero for 2030. That's what we're aiming at. So I wondered what actual documented steps you're taking year on year on that regard.
So we do sort of report our carbon emissions under the, let me remember the name of it, standardized emissions carbon reporting, streamlined energy and carbon reporting requirements in our annual accounts. So we do measure them. We measure scope 1 and scope 2. We don't currently measure scope 3, and we are looking at ways for doing that. In terms of a specific timeline, whilst York has specific targets and North Yorkshire has specific targets, the company sits between the two and is basically sort of governed under its Articles of Association and takes its sort of guidance from the board. We are keen on getting our sort of energy down, and we are ISO 50000 accredited, which has a plan within that in terms of carbon reduction. But ultimately, we're also trying to provide value for money for the shareholder. So there's that balance between getting to where we need to be, but also doing it in a way that doesn't create additional burdens or inefficiencies for the taxpayer.
You have a supplementary, Councillor Kent.
I wonder if I could push you just slightly further and say I understand there's a difference in targets between North Yorkshire and York, but even if are you setting any kind of timeline at all? Have you done that, or are you making any plans to, even if it's taking the longer stop, which is North Yorkshire's?
We do not have a firm timeline set at this moment in time.
Okay, I think I'd probably encourage you to look at that insofar as I have any power to do so as part of this committee. Thank you.
Okay. Move on to the final section. So in terms of looking ahead, as I said earlier, we're sort of cautiously optimistic that this year should be in line, if not slightly ahead of last year. Next year, however, we've had early indications of what we think the price is going to be for the gas market. And then if it does normalise and if we don't have any further shocks, then that's going to be a significant drop in revenue because we have been benefiting from incredibly high rates over the past couple of years, or the last year and a half. And I think sort of one of the problems we've got here is that we're then starting to see some of the additional costs coming through. We have been largely insulated thanks to the landfill gas and thanks to some third-party processing. But ultimately, sort of we're limited in what we can also pass on to the shareholders because they themselves, the local authority budgets, are going to be sort of stretched. So our current sort of strawman estimates at this very early point in the budget would sort of say that all things taken into consideration, we're probably looking at a break-even profit position for next year. Obviously, we're working towards improving that. And part of that will be determined by what's happening with the government waste strategies in the medium term.
Any more questions? No? That's great. Is there anything more you wanted to say, Sandy?
No, I think we're all to date, Chair. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
You're more than welcome to leave the meeting now, virtually leave the meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, we'll move on then to the Make It York finance update. And just a reminder that part of this will be done in confidential session, but we'll start off in public and then move into that, if that's okay.
an overview of where we are?
Yeah, that'd be great.
So
Thanks,
the
Sarah.
report sets out our performance for the past 6 months and reflects on the financial end of last year, but also gives a good narrative of how our performance is. Again, as we're a tech company, it's not just about finance, it's the social value we put back into the city. This year is still proving challenging due to the cost of living and due to some of the activities that we do rely on sponsors and income generation, and we have seen that slow up this year. But we have a really good story to tell so far, that last year's accounts, we got a clean bill of accounts from our audit accounts, and we also made a profit of £187,050, which from the position where we were at about 18 months ago when I came to Make It York, it's made a massive, significant change, and we are projecting that we will become solvent this year. And we're projecting another profit for the following, for this year. The main reasons we've been able to bring about the changes in our financial position is because we've made savings through introducing a tendering process and introducing a profit share in those, so that we have done better in terms of Christmas market income and summer income activities, which has proven successful. We were looking in terms of, we got a high rates rebate that helped last year. This won't be the case this year, but we've projected that into the figures for this year. Also, last year was spent checking every overhead, looking at where we could make savings and doing things differently. And that brought about significant savings for the organisation that we have been able to bring over to this year as well. And also last year we held back on recruitment. This year we've gone ahead with some of the recruitment, knowing that we can afford those places going forward. So I think on a financial view, we are doing well. We're still cautious, we're still managing that budget, and we believe that we will hit the 24,000 profit that we've said, and be also able to keep some of the COVID insurance fund that we were successful in securing. So being able to not only bring ourselves back into solvency, but also put some money in reserves. Hence, we're talking to the council about another SLA going forward, which we'd like the committee to approve today. So I think it is a good news story for Make It York. In terms of governance, I think the governance has got much stronger. Obviously, we've got 2 new members on the committee, and we've done an induction process for both of the members that have joined the committee. We've also set up the advisory board that has met 3 times already this year, that is made up of our members, so that we get good feedback and we can change and respond to what the members want from the organisation. And we've also brought in a new finance director. One of the concerns that I had was our systems are very clunky and very slow and don't provide timely information. We've got a new head of finance whose first task is to look at, speeding that information up and providing better information to the local authority. We are now sharing monthly management accounts with the local authority, so that we're more transparent in the financial information that we share.
Thank you, Sarah. What I'm going to do now is suggest that we now go into a private session, because I feel certain that any questions we might ask would stray across the confidential section, and then we'll come back into public session, make the go through the recommendations in public session. Is that all right with everyone? And I apologise to everyone, I'm now about to usher out of the room, but we do need to go into private session for a short while. Okay, great. Welcome back. Anyone who's joining us online. We have gone through the confidential papers, and we're now at the point of looking back to the report and the recommendations, which are paragraphs 2 and 3 on page 57 of our packs, which are to note the shareholder report and to approve the updated service specification noted paragraphs 14 and 15. Everybody happy to do that? Yes. Marvellous. Then that concludes item number 6. Thank you very much, everyone. And Sarah, as ever, you're welcome to leave the meeting at this point.
I was just double checking because some of the papers are the wrong colour in here. If could just make sure that we check on the online agenda because some things aren't showing that should be showing. So appendix, just in case that's true, so like appendix 7, company dashboard isn't showing online. And some of this is just double check that the restricted ones are restricted and the unrestricted ones aren't. Yeah. It's about 10 different appendices as well with it.
It is the most complicated agenda we've had for a long time, I think. So thanks everyone for your patience in working our way through it. We now move on to item number 7, which is the City of York Trading Limited update. So I think I'm handing over to you for this, Karen.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, apologies to the shareholder committee that our public report was late. Unfortunately, owing to one director having resigned and various other people being ill, we had difficulty arranging a board meeting that was quorate until last Wednesday. We also only received our audited accounts hot off the press last Wednesday as well. So it was all very last minute, but thank you for your patience. The detailed performance update is obviously confidential, but I just wanted to give a few sort of salient bits of information. So obviously, as a tech-all company, we are responsive to the needs of CYC as our main client. And this year, their needs have been to reduce their reliance on agency staff, which from our perspective has been fairly, catastrophic. Let's put it that way. So the numbers of requests that we've had have been decreasing in line with that stated plan, and the numbers of staff we have had transferring to permanent contracts with CYC have increased, as you might expect. We've been working to replace that, any lost income from City of York, from our other brands, which have proved challenging in some respects. We're also looking at frameworks, tenders, and acquisitions as part of that income replacement. I mentioned the fact that one of our directors has resigned, and we're in the process currently of going through the recruitment of another non-exec director. Interestingly, it's always the job that we advertise that's not paying anything that gets the most number of applications of any job that we ever put on our website. And the same has happened this time. We've had a very good and strong group of applications, and we're going to be closing the applications tomorrow and hopefully shortlisting at the end of the week. Once the board have interviewed and have a recommendation, then we'll come back to you for approval for appointment of that new non-exec director. Over the summer, we liaised with the City of York to renew our contract, which took some time, and it was quite a lot of work with myself and Dan, who's here at the moment. Lots of toing and froing about the legal elements of it, but we finally got that sorted in September. And we now have a contract until September 2028 with a couple of years possibly on top to renew. We have produced our statutory accounts. They haven't yet been filed. They have been signed by me and immediately returned back to our auditors, who will be filing them in due course, but they are available and they should be in the publicly available papers, I think. Happy to answer any questions, but I suspect they will probably be some things that are in the confidential report.
Thanks, Karen. Just before we do go into private session, is there anything that anyone wanted to ask in public? No, then we'll move into private session again. Apologies, Max. Okay. Brilliant. Welcome back, everyone. We've just gone back into public session so we can deal with the recommendations. Recommendations are on page 3 of the supplementary report at paragraphs 4 and 5. They are to note the statutory accounts and to note the confidential performance update. Everybody content to do that? Yep, marvellous, thank you. That concludes item number 7. So thank you very much, Karen. And of course, you're quite welcome to leave us at this point. And I will now skip to my other papers for agenda item number 8, the Veritau update. So I shall hand over to you, Max, and obviously at the appropriate point, we'll go into the confidential session.
Thank you, Chair. So this is our update report. I think just to provide some key messages, I think we've made sort of steady progress since the last update report to the June meeting. We've gained a number of new clients, particularly in the education sector, both for internal audit and information governance services. We've now become a living wage accredited employer, and our Good Business Charter accreditation has been renewed. Also, draw your attention to paragraph 6, which confirms that internal audit practices being subject to external review by the Chartered Institute of Internal Auditors, and they've effectively confirmed that our working practices are at the appropriate standard, which is a very good thing, because if they weren't, it would make our job of selling services to other clients particularly difficult. So that's been quite helpful. In terms of our sort of financial position, the accounts for last year, they've been audited. The accounts have been approved, they've been audited. We're just waiting for the final sign off by our external auditors, BHP. But there's a copy of the draft accounts as a confidential item to the report. In terms of the current year, the management accounts show the group is on track to exceed our profit target. There's no particular issues or exceptional items in the year so far, so very much as we would expect. And then finally, final item is a request to the two shareholders, so CYC and NYC, to amend one item in the shareholder agreement, and that relating to the sort of financial limit on transactions. We are asking that limit is increased from 100,000 as it is now to 1 million. And the reason for that is that effectively it is limiting our ability to bid for external work.
Thank you very much, Max. Okay, for the last time, we'll go into private session. Okay, welcome back. Anyone who's stuck with us this long into the meeting of quite confusing agenda. So we have recommendations on this report on page 124, section 13. I'm going to take them both individually. So 13A, that we note the group's performance since the last business update. Is everyone happy to note that? Yeah. And then recommendation B, we just had a conversation during the private session on this is a recommendation that has to go to executive committee, and we are content to recommend it goes to executive with a little work done in the meantime around the detail of the governance arrangements and the shareholder agreement, and also the detail of the figures. That is something that has to go to executive committee in any case. So that gives a little bit of time to do that work. We also are very mindful of the requirement to liaise with North Yorkshire Council as the other shareholder in Veritau to make sure that we're not taking any decisions out of step with them. But we do note that their shareholder committee doesn't meet until March. So is everyone content? Have I summarised that accurately? Yes, thank you, Councillor Kent. Okay, so that's how we'll deal with recommendation 13B, and thanks very much everyone for that. The final item on the agenda is the shareholder committee work plan, which is at item 9. Any questions on that? No? Okay, then I have not been notified of any urgent business, and so our meeting is finally closed.